Hi, friends. Crystal of Oddly Endearing here, and I have another episode of Vintage is All Get Out. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Lindsay from Redesign the Find. Hi, Lindsay. So, what part of the country are you in?
I'm in Seattle, or just south of Seattle, in Washington. It's raining right now. Imagine that. Um, I'm originally from Peoria, Illinois, and I lived in Chicago for about 14 years. So I kind of consider Chicago my second hometown too.
Very cool. So you grew up in Chicago and then and moved to Washington. So, when did you develop a love for vintage?
I've kind of had it since my childhood, as a lot of people do. My whole family have different collections. My great grandmas had all the kitschy lady head vases and collectibles that everybody wants to get their hands on now, that their whole houses were full of that back then. And my mom inherited several pieces of that. My mom and my other grandmas on her side did a lot of dishes, glass dishes, pottery, Roseville vases, whole vases, the occasional Pyrex dish.
Wow.
Um, and then on my dad's side, it was more, usable household stuff. My grandparents' house, everything in it was vintage because they never really threw anything away. um,
Absolutely.
it was very, they had 7 children, so it was very useful household things, but everything in their house was older and they kept it really nice. And my dad inherited that. Um, my dad actually liked to go to estate sales, and I never knew that until recently. But my dad pretty much outfitted our entire house in useful vintage things too, like everything from our dinner dishes to our table and chairs. Like everything in the house was vintage. The garbage cans were all vintage metal waste baskets, which is one thing that I like to find. And so growing up with all of that, I had an appreciation for older things and an appreciation for keeping keeping things and taking care of it.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So, and then as I got older, I started finding those things. It's like, oh, my great grandma had that. Oh, I grew up with that. I didn't even know that was vintage. It was just in my house.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question is when you were younger, did you have that recognition that this stuff is older that we're using? Or was
Not
that's what was
really like,
the house?
yeah, I didn't even know what eras things came from, but I knew that we had to take care of them.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
I had a similar upbringing. I grew up in my grandparents' house, and I mean, I knew what things this belonged to my great grandmother, this belonged to to this person, this person. So I kind of like understood, but everything still kind of had a use. So yeah.
I'm the oldest granddaughter and great granddaughter on my mom's side. So I was lucky enough to be entrusted with a few things. Like I have my grandma's whole china set. And so that taught me the value of things too. Like this china set has been around since the 1940s, and I was the one who was given to. So it's my job to take care of that until, it gets passed on, hopefully to the next generation.
Absolutely. And the stories that go along with it. That's what
Yeah.
I love. I'm the person in my family that always wants to keep the
Yeah.
the antiques that nobody wants anymore. But
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
the stories and the feelings behind them as well.
Right. I have my grandmother's childhood toy. She got it when she was 4 years old, and it's this blue buggy, and it's in such great condition. I actually had it repaired one time, and my kids play with it now. And I'm like, be careful. This is 8 years old now. Like, please don't crash it into the walls. But it's meant to be played with, and it
Yeah,
always has been. And so, as long as they're careful, I'll let them continue to play with it.
absolutely. And maybe they can let their kids play with it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the person in my family who I feel like I take on a lot of those things because I can't let them go away.
I
So
understand. It's like a responsibility.
it is. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I get that. So
Yeah.
have you been as crafty for so long as well?
Yeah, I've always been kind of creative and artistic, and a lot of people in my family are too, in various art forms. My daughters are very creative now. So I've always enjoyed it. I got away from it for several years, especially when my girls were little, but it's a good it's a good outlet. It's something for me that I can do after the kids are asleep that is just for me. It's my own personal um, mom time.
Absolutely
Yeah.
therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So obviously the name behind or the story behind Redesign the Find is all about giving a new life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you developed that shop, did you already have in mind that you were going to kind of meld the two, crafts and vintage?
Not really. It kind of came about by accident. I was looking for things for my own craft room and my laundry room. At the time, we were in a new construction house. It had no flavor, no character. So I wanted to add something in that was vintage, that was also a storage. And so I happened upon Ransburg canisters. Ransburg is Dave Ransburg is a grandson of the Ransburg family, and he was the former mayor in Peoria, Illinois, and also a curator at the museum, or he was on the board at the museum in Peoria. And so I came across a collection of his at the museum, and I was like, that's what I am looking for. That's what I've been wanting. And so I kind of became obsessed with it. And through trying to hunt down those canisters, I came across TV trays.
Mhm.
And my mom had seen an idea where a shop had painted their TV tray and they used it as a sign. She's like, that would be a great project for you. So I made my first laundry room sign, and I was like, oh, I could probably sell these. So then trying to hunt down TV trays, I found out what estate sales were. Like I said, my dad had gone to estate sales, but I didn't know about that until
Good
I rediscovered
knowledge.
sales. Yeah, exactly. Um, I rediscovered estate sales, and I kept finding all these cool vintage things that I couldn't pass up. And if I liked them, then somebody else was going to like them too. And
Absolutely.
so I started buying that, and so the vintage side of my business started that way, kind of by accident. And then I kind of gave up the crafting for a little while the girls were really little, and picked it back up again, kind of right after my son was born. So
Wow. So
yeah,
how old is your shop on Instagram?
about 3 years. Yeah,
Nice,
yeah,
me too.
March 3 years ago.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So let's see where we are on the questions. So I know you have a lot of wonderful vintage finds and things that you reimagine. What's your favorite vintage find ever?
It was this little tin bartender toy. Um, I found him. He didn't have batteries in him. I was just kind of praying that I would get him home and he would work.
A gamble.
Yeah. So I looked it up and researched it, and then I bought the batteries because they were like the big ones.
Hmm.
Put the
That's
batteries in,
how you know
and
it's old.
yeah, and it started to work, and I was so excited. His nose would light up red. Well, he would shake a martini. He had a little routine. He would shake a martini, and he would pour it, and then he would drink it, and then his face would get red, and then he'd have smoke coming out of his ears.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
do the whole routine again, and I was just so ecstatic that it worked. That was actually one of my favorite finds and one of my favorite sales, although I kind of regret selling it too.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a really good find. I've seen similar ones that you described, but I don't know that I've ever seen them working.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think I've
very
ever seen
rare.
them working.
And he was very well taken care of too.
That's
So
wonderful. Did you find them at an estate sale or?
I found him at an estate sale. This person was definitely a collector of toys and all kinds of things. It was one of the best estate sales that I've ever gone to. Just the whole house was collections. It was amazing.
That's the best. I love those kinds of estate sales because
Yeah,
they really
I
care
feel
about their stuff. It's not just in the attic.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's all over the house, all kinds of collections. Everything there was vintage. And that's my favorite kind because I feel like I can pass a little bit of their collection on to other people too, for them to enjoy. Um,
Absolutely. So speaking of shopping for vintage, where are some of your best places to shop for vintage? Because I know I actually have a few friends up in the Pacific Northwest area that sell vintage, mostly clothing, because there's a huge market for it in Portland and everywhere. But it really isn't as easy to find, from what I hear, as it is down
Right.
here in the South.
Yeah. I think because Seattle was not developed as long ago as some of the other parts of the country, um, it is far and few between to find a really good estate sale. But when you find them, they're fun. That's my favorite place, because I get to see the inside of their house and get to feel a little bit of who that person was and respect their items and hopefully give them a new home. Pass them on to somebody else who will enjoy them just as much. Give them a new life. Yeah, estate sales are my favorite.
I love estate sales too. We don't, for some reason, in the last year, they've gained a lot of popularity in my area, and there'll just be lines, and I've never stayed for an estate sale that has lines of people, but I love estate sales because I don't know, I have this weird fascination with like being able to go into somebody's house and just wander
Yeah,
around. Like it feels like something you shouldn't be doing, because
right.
like,
Yeah,
even when you walk up to the door, you're used to ringing a doorbell or knocking, but estate sales, you just
just walk
typically
right in.
walk right in. It's
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, it's the feeling of like you're not supposed to be doing it, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's a thrilling experience. It's so I learned I've been estate selling for a little while. I'd always have a baby strapped on my chest, be leading a toddler by the hand. Stay next to me. What are the rules of the estate sale? No touching. Stay next to mommy. Follow me wherever I go. And sometimes I use the kids strategically too. If I need to block off the corner of the kitchen so I can go through the cabinets, I might put the toddler behind me. um, but I would always kind of show up at 10 or 11 to the estate sales until one time I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. I didn't understand why, but this whole house was full of jadeite. Like, oh my gosh, the amount of jadeite. I actually checked in with a jadeite collector. Like, is this for real? Like, is this all fake or is this all real stuff? He's like, oh no, that's a whole house full of real jadeite. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to show up an hour early this time. This is not what I usually do. Well, there was already like 200 people there an hour before the sale started. So I'm listening to conversations and I realized that this was an antique dealer in town who had passed away. So all of his friends showed up at 5 a.m. Their names on the list. And that's the first time that I realized there was kind of more of a strategic like game to how estate sales work. And sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. You can always show up at 10 or 11 and there's still something there to be found.
Mm-hmm.
So
I I've developed a kind of a weird strategy for estate sales. I do the multi-visit approach, where I might go on Thursday, when it starts, and I might peruse around. I might buy something I really, really want, but I'm definitely going to talk to the people who are running it. And just like, say some, something that makes me memorable. And then I'm going to go back later, like maybe Saturday or Sunday when it's discounted, and hope things I want are still there. But then because they remember me and I came back, they usually give me a pretty good deal because they want it gone.
Yeah. I've grabbed a few things out of a collection that I thought would sell well or that I was excited about, and then gone back on the half off Sunday and like cleaned up the rest of the collection.
I've done that too. I found that the multi-visit approach works. It's like they see that you're excited about it and that you came back. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's much more casual, usually on the last day of the sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not as many people pushing the